All right, so welcome to another deep dive, everybody.
Yes, excited to be here.
Today, we're diving into something that I think is pretty fascinating.
Okay.
We're looking at Kia, specifically their record-breaking sales in October in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of it seems to be driven by, you guessed it, electric vehicles.
Yeah, EVs are really taking off.
They are, yeah. And it seems like, this isn't just a little, blip on the radar.
Right.
This might actually be signaling like a bigger shift in the whole auto industry.
Interesting.
And get this, we even have a comment from a Tesla owner who switched to a Kia.
Wow. Okay, so we've got some juicy stuff to dig into.
Yeah, so buckle up because we're going to break down what this all means, not just for Kia, but for, you. If you're thinking about getting an EV, what does this mean for the future of cars?
Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack here.
So to kick things off, let's talk about those record-breaking sales.
Sure.
Kia sold, get this, almost 70,000 vehicles in October.
Well,
that's a 16% increase from their previous October record.
that's huge. What's driving that kind of growth?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And Kia themselves are saying a lot of it is due to the demand, like the strong demand for their electric models.
Makes sense. People are really starting to embrace EVs.
They are, yeah. And I thought it was really interesting. They talk about electrified sales.
Right.
And those hit an all-time high in October. But what does that actually mean? Like, when we say electrified, what are we really talking about here?
Yeah, so electrified sales is kind of a catch-all term. It includes, there's three main categories.
Okay.
So you've got your all-electric vehicles, your EVs.
The ones that run purely on electricity.
Exactly, no gas at all. Then you have plug-in hybrids, PHEVs.
Right.
Those combine an electric motor with a gasoline engine, and you can plug them in to recharge.
Gotcha.
And then, of course, you have your standard hybrids, or HEVs.
Yeah.
Those also use both an electric motor and a gas engine, but you can't plug them in.
Right.
So for Kia, we saw all three of those categories experience, massive sales increases last month. EV specifically jumped a whopping 70% compared to last October.
Wow.
PHEVs went up by 65%.
Wow.
And even the HEVs saw an increase of almost 50%.
That's incredible. So, okay, let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. Kia's first dedicated electric model, the EV6, just shattered its October sales record, selling almost 2,000 units. In fact, over 17,700 EV6s have been sold in the U.S. just in the first 10 months of this year.
That's impressive. Why do you think that one's been so popular?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, the design.
Yeah.
It's gotten a lot of praise for being super sleek.
That's a looker.
It is, right? And also the range is pretty impressive too, right? Some models can go over 300 miles on a single charge.
That's a big selling point for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure. And I think what also helps is that it's relatively affordable, especially compared to some of the other EVs out there. So it seems like they've hit a really good sweet spot there.
Yeah.
But what about their 3-row electric SUV, the EV9?
Ah, yes.
Now, this thing also sold almost 2,000 units in October. So it's matching the EV6, even though it's significantly more expensive.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
That's a good question. I'm wondering if it's because, the EV9, it really offers something that, a lot of other electric SUVs don't. It's got a really, truly spacious and comfortable third row.
Right.
And it just seems like it was designed with families in mind.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why it's resonating. People are willing to pay a bit more for that extra space and comfort.
Makes sense. And this kind of leads us to that comment you mentioned earlier from the Tesla owner who made the switch to the EV9.
Yeah.
What did they have to say?
Well, they specifically called out the EV9's quality and just the overall feel of the car. And I mean, obviously it's just one person's opinion.
Sure.
But it does make you think, right?
Yeah.
Are traditional car manufacturers like Kia actually starting to catch up to Tesla when it comes to, that perceived quality, that brand desirability?
Yeah, that's the question.
And speaking of the EV9, didn't production for the U.S. market actually start here this past summer?
Yeah. It did, which means it's likely going to qualify for that full $7,500 federal tax credit next year.
Oh, wow.
Big deal. Could potentially knock the price down quite a bit for people.
Yeah, for sure.
And here's something interesting. Kia is actually offering a $7,500 incentive right now to match that potential tax credit.
So they're kind of giving buyers like a $7,500 discount right now.
Pretty much, yeah. They're anticipating that tax credit and making the EV9 that much more enticing to buyers.
Wow.
Now, of course, there is a small price increase for the 2025 model year.
Okay.
It's going up by $700. So the starting price will be just under $55,000.
Gotcha.
But even with that, if you factor in the tax credit, you could potentially get a three-row electric SUV for under $50,000.
That's incredible. So it seems like Kia is really, going all in on these electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And they're really making some smart moves to attract, a lot of different buyers.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting
Yeah.
because Kia's success could actually point to a much bigger shift happening in the whole auto industry.
That's a great point. So are traditional car manufacturers like Kia actually starting to challenge Tesla's dominance in the EV market?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to explore next. It is a big question.
Yeah.
Right? Like for years, Tesla was practically the only name in the game when it came to electric cars.
Yeah, they were like the trailblazers.
Yeah, the innovators, the disruptors, they were pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But now it seems like all the big players are waking up.
Right.
The Fords, the GMs, the Toyotas, and of course the Kias of the world. They're investing like heavily in their own electric lineups.
So it's kind of like, David and Goliath, but with electric cars. So how do these more traditional companies stack up against Tesla? What are their strengths?
Well, one big advantage they have is experience.
Hmm.
They've been manufacturing cars on a massive scale for decades.
Right.
They have the factories, the supply chains, the expertise to build cars efficiently and cost effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense. They've been doing it for so long.
Exactly. And they also have these huge dealer networks all over the place,
Right.
which gives them a major edge when it comes to sales and service.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla's still got that cool factor though, right?
They do, yeah. They have a really strong brand image, especially among, the early adopters
Yeah.
and the tech enthusiasts. But I think as electric cars become more mainstream, that cool factor might not be as important to the average buyer.
So what will be more important then?
I think practicality, reliability, and price are going to be key.
Yeah.
People want electric cars that are affordable, dependable, and that just fit seamlessly into their everyday lives.
Right.
And that's where traditional automakers can really shine. They have a long history of building cars that meet those needs, and they're applying that expertise to their electric models now.
Okay, but what about, charging infrastructure and battery technology? Those are still big concerns for a lot of people, right?
Absolutely. Those are definitely hurdles that need to be overcome for widespread EV adoption.
Yeah,
Having enough charging stations is crucial.
for sure.
Range anxiety, that fear of running out of charge, that's still a major barrier for a lot of people.
Yeah, I get that. So how are we addressing that?
Well, both governments and private companies are investing heavily in expanding charging networks.
Okay.
We're seeing more and more fast charging stations popping up all over the place along highways and in urban areas.
Right.
So it's becoming easier and easier for people to charge their EVs on the go. And as for battery technology, that's constantly evolving too.
In what ways? What kind of advancements are we seeing?
Well, for one thing, batteries are becoming more energy dense, meaning they can store more energy in the same amount of space, which translates to longer range.
Oh, that's great.
And we're also seeing a lot of advancements in battery chemistry,
Okay.
making them safer and more durable.
So it sounds like the EV market is becoming more and more competitive, which is ultimately good news for consumers, right?
Definitely. More competition means more choice, better prices, and faster innovation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you're going to see a much wider variety of EVs hitting the market. Sedans, SUVs, trucks, you name it,
Cool.
and at different price points to fit different budgets. This brings us back to Kia and those impressive sales figures for the EV6 and the EV9.
Okay, so how does Kia fit into this bigger picture?
Well, I think Kia is a great example of a traditional automaker that's making the transition to electric really successfully.
Yeah.
They're really listening to what consumers want,
Right.
and they're delivering EVs that are stylish, practical, and affordable. And their recent sales success shows that their strategy is working.
Yeah, but are they doing anything specific to stand out in this increasingly crowded market?
Look, their focus on design and technology is definitely a key differentiator.
Okay.
The EV6, for instance, has won a ton of awards for its sleek and futuristic styling.
Yeah, I can see that.
And the EV9 is loaded with all kinds of advanced features, like a huge infotainment screen, a head-up display, and a whole suite of driver assistance systems.
So they're combining those practical elements with some really cool tech features.
Exactly. And they're doing a great job of positioning themselves as a forward-thinking and innovative brand.
That's really interesting. But what about Tesla? How are they responding to this increasing competition from companies like Kia?
Well, Tesla's definitely feeling the heat. They've had to adjust their pricing strategy recently, lowering the prices of some of their models to stay competitive.
So they're not just sitting back and letting everyone else take over?
No, not at all. They're also continuing to innovate and expand their product line.
Okay.
They recently launched their Cybertruck, which has generated a ton of buzz.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And they're working on a more affordable electric car that could be a real game changer.
It sounds like the EV market is really heating up. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But
Yeah.
what about the bigger picture? What about the impact of government policies and incentives on EV adoption?
Yeah, government policies play a crucial role in speeding up the transition to electric vehicles.
Yeah, so we've been talking about, the EV market and how it's really heating up
Yeah.
with companies like Kia, really stepping up their game.
Right.
And you mentioned that like government policies play a really big role in this whole transition to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
What kind of policies are we talking about specifically?
Well, there's actually a bunch of different things governments can do to encourage more people to buy EVs.
Okay.
One of the most common things is offering financial incentives,
Right.
like tax credits or rebates, which can make EVs more affordable for people.
Yeah, we talked about that $7,500 federal tax credit in the U.S., right?
Exactly. And a lot of states even offer their own incentives on top of that.
So that helps make EVs more attractive right off the bat. Are there other incentives too?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Some governments are investing a lot of money in building out charging infrastructure.
Okay.
So, like networks of public charging stations to make it easier for people to charge their cars.
Right.
And others are putting in place stricter emission standards for vehicles,
Okay.
which basically forces automakers to produce more electric models.
So it's kind of like a multi-pronged approach to really push that shift toward EVs.
Exactly.
But what about the environmental impact of all this?
Right.
I know people have concerns about the mining of materials for those EV batteries and
Yeah.
just the overall like sustainability of making electric cars.
Yeah, those are definitely valid concerns.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that switching to electric vehicles isn't a perfect solution.
Right.
There are still some environmental challenges that we need to address.
Yep.
But I think it's also really important to look at the big picture here. While making EVs does have an impact on the environment,
Right.
studies have shown that over their lifespan, electric cars produce way fewer emissions than gas-powered cars.
Okay, so it's about weighing those pros and cons and thinking about those long-term benefits.
Exactly.
What are some of the things that are being done to address those environmental concerns, though?
Well, there's a ton of research and development happening right now,
Okay.
focused on making EV batteries more sustainable.
Okay.
For example, scientists are working on new battery chemistries that use fewer rare earth minerals.
Right.
And there are also a lot of advancements in battery recycling technologies
Okay.
to reduce waste and get those valuable materials back.
That's great.
Plus, a lot of automakers are committed to using renewable energy sources in their factories to lower their carbon footprint.
So it's a work in progress, but it sounds like there's a lot of effort going into making the whole EV industry more sustainable.
Definitely. It's not just about the cars themselves, it's about the whole system. From getting the materials to making the cars to recycling them at the end of their life.
This has been a really, really insightful conversation.
Yeah.
We've covered so much,
We have,
from
yeah.
Kia's record-breaking sales to those bigger trends that are changing the EV market.
Right.
The challenges, the opportunities,
Yeah.
the role of those government policies.
For sure.
And of course, the importance of making it all sustainable.
Absolutely.
What do you think is like the main takeaway for our listeners today?
I think the main thing to remember is that the shift to electric vehicles is happening.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Right.
And we're seeing all these different factors come together to make it happen. Consumer demand, those tech advancements, the support from governments, and that growing awareness of how EVs can benefit the environment.
Right.
It's creating this really dynamic and exciting market with a lot of potential.
It really feels like we're at the start of something big, like a huge change in the whole auto industry. So what's next? What should our listeners be looking out for in the, months and years to come?
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see how the competition changes.
Yeah.
Will Tesla stay on top? Or will those traditional automakers like Kia catch up?
Right.
Will we see some brand new companies come into the mix?
Yeah.
What new innovations will we see?
Yeah.
In battery tech, in charging, in those self-driving features?
Right.
And how will governments continue to shape things?
Yeah.
There are so many questions out there, and we'll see those answers unfold over the next few years.
It's definitely an exciting time to be watching all this happening in the world of EVs.
It is.
And a huge thank you to you for taking us on this deep dive with us and sharing all your knowledge.
My pleasure.
For our listeners, we hope this has given you some valuable insights and
Yes,
something to think about.
definitely.
Keep an eye out for those new developments in the EV world.
Absolutely.
And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll be driving around in your very own electric car.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks, everyone.